Welcome to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus 2021 Minority Business Forecast, bringing together South Carolina lawmakers and the state's most prominent professionals and minority business leaders discussing topics and issues vital to competitiveness and overall success. Post, share, and tag someone you know that needs information, resources, and advice, because this is a conversation you won't want to miss. But first, please welcome SCLBC Chair, Representative Patricia M. Hennigan.
Good morning and welcome to the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. This is a new effort by the caucus, but one that we hope will become an annual event. The state of minority small business is very important to members of the caucus and me. This event is designed to bring together South Carolina lawmakers with the state's most prominent minority business leaders for a frank discussion of issues vital to South Carolina minority business competitiveness and overall production. This event will also link DBEs and minority businesses with state agencies and departments with independent contractual opportunities. We have assembled a knowledgeable and exciting group of panel and panelists, all given the charge by me to help South Carolina minority businesses start, expand, and achieve success. I hope you enjoy the forecast. And please remember, you can always call on me and the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus to be on the front lines fighting for you. I welcome you to the 2021 Minority Business Forecast.
Thank you for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. This panel is entitled U.S. in SC, Economics and What It Means for Minority Business, featuring attorney Bakari Sellers with Strom Law Firm. The CNN commentator made history in 2006, becoming the youngest African-American ever elected in office at the age of 22 to the South Carolina House of Representatives. Senator Gerald Malloy was elected to the South Carolina Senate in 2002 and has won every election since. Senator Malloy currently serves on several committees, including banking and insurance, education, ethics, legislative oversight, and rules and transportation. Senator Malloy is also an attorney and owns the Malloy Law Firm in Hartsville, South Carolina. Frank Knapp is the president and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. He currently serves on the board of directors of the American Sustainable Business Council and co-chair of Small Business for America's Future. Dr. Delores Dacosta is the executive director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Dr. Dacosta has over 20 years of experience in federal policies and regulations and previously served as the regional director for U.S. Senator Tim Scott. Dr. Joseph Jackson is the executive director of the USDOT Small Business Transportation Resource Center, Mid-South Atlantic Resource Center. Dr. Jackson also serves as the president and CEO of the Greater Atlanta Economic Alliance, which is a 501c3 nonprofit aimed to increase capacity and the capabilities of the small, female, and minority business enterprise as it relates to the transportation and construction industries. These are our panelists. Now, let's get to the conversation.
I want to thank everyone for joining us again for the 2021 Minority Business Forecast. My name is Trey Taylor. Please continue to post and share this information out because we've been having such great conversations today, and I'm sure this will be another one. I want to start today with a topic that we've talked about a couple of times in some previous panels, and that is a disparity study. Some of our neighbors have taken the steps to study the level of participation with DBEs and minority businesses within their state. Does South Carolina need a comprehensive disparity study? Bakari, I want to start with you. I know you've got to leave us early, so what do you think?
It's along the lines, and I know Senator Malloy knows this very well, probably better than most because he's doing the work. But we need this study to be done along not just our economic institutions, but also amongst public education, healthcare, and the list goes on and on and on. And I think that while we're talking about disparities amongst race in South Carolina, we also must talk about disparities between urban and rural, because many times the discussion about rural South Carolina, again, I hate to pick on my good friend, Senator Malloy, but he knows the plight that many rural South Carolinians face every day. So to answer your question bluntly, Trey, yes, we have to be willing to dig in, do the work, do the research necessary to bolster the claims that many of us make on a daily basis.
Senator Malloy, Bakari said that you're in the vineyards doing the work, and you certainly are and have been for quite some time. What do you think about this disparity study?
So I think that obviously the disparities are tremendous. I think that if you look at our state population as to what it is, and probably 27-28% African American. I agree with Mr. Sellers when he said that it's urban and rural. What we have is that the influx of people in our state, what we're seeing now in South Carolina, we're up to about 5.2 million people. The coronavirus that we've had in recent times has had a tremendous impact upon people of color because of health disparities. As we continue to go down the road to for the recovery, we continue to face with challenges with the vaccine that will end up promoting us on the economic return to recovery. And so, what does it affect? Well, it affects colleges and universities. The people that were hit pretty hard were the first line.
We lost him again. We lost his audio. While Senator Malloy is, are you back with us, Senator Malloy? I'll ask Dr. Dacosta about her opinion about the disparity study. You are executive director of the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. What do you think about a disparity study? Do we need that in South Carolina?
I agree that we do need a disparity study, but I also agree with Bakari that it has to be more than just business. At the commission, we look at disparities in healthcare, education, housing across the board, because you cannot focus on one area and leave the others out. So therefore, it has to be a comprehensive study that also includes recommendations as well as action items on how we're going to fulfill the discrepancies that we find in this study.
And Mr. Knapp, who would pay for that? Who do you think should pay for that disparity study? Whose responsibility is that?
Well, you've asked the wrong person on this panel, since I don't work for the state. Joe and Bakari and I have nothing to do with how things are funded here. That's more of a question for Delores and
well, but I'm sure you have an opinion. I'm sure you have an opinion as to who should pay for it.
A study like this is going to be paid by the state, one way or another. If we're going to do it, the state's got to pay for it. And while it's a very worthwhile study, I tell you what, I'm very much more interested in is getting more small businesses minority owned and in the rural areas. I think we need to put a lot of emphasis on that. I hate to wait for studies that may take a year, and we wasted a year when we know what we need to do.
Bakari, do you have a comment about that? Should the state pay for it? And where do you get the money if the state pays for it?
I think, if we're waiting on the state to pay for it, then my twins will be going to college by then. I think that we have to explore various public-private partnerships. I think that you'll see in places like Charleston and Greenville, maybe even Florence, where there is a growth focus, maybe Orangeburg, they will partner with universities in their area, the Benedicts of the world. They'll partner with the USC's schools of public policy, and Charleston, maybe MUSC, to do this work. But the work needs to be done. I just don't think that the state puts enough emphasis on the value of diversity. I appreciate the question, Trey, but I think that we have to go back and kind of reverse engineer it. And I think on this one, both Dr. Dacosta and Joe Jackson would agree with me that we have to actually see, and we work and live and play and build businesses in a state that doesn't necessarily value diversity. And so the question is, first, how do we get a value proposition placed on this before we can even take these steps to utilize resources to both diagnose the problem we know exists and then to build out from there? Frank talks about bringing these small businesses to our rural areas, and that is a part of the panacea. That is a part of the cure. The question is, again, Frank knows the answer to this, but how do we get them there, and how do we get the resources to get them there is even a better question.
Well, what about private companies? Are we a state that can get some private companies like in other states have done to pay for this study? Bakari, I'm going to go back to you. I know you have to, leave the panel soon. So,
man, my wife needs this mute button. I know whoever's running the mute button backstage, my wife is going to ask you for this, because it's doing a good job.
I'm muting you.
Ask y'all how she can keep me from talking so much at the house. She gonna invest in this. Again, I think that we're advocating our duty as a state, but yes, I do think that, and this is part of the genius that is, the Gerald Malloys of the world, the Hugh Leathermans of the world, etc., because they can tie this into a tax package or whatever to recruit the next Amazon or Boeing to our state. But again, I think that we have to kind of look at this holistically. Frank said it. I mean, small businesses are the lifebloods of our community. I mean, they're the backbone of the American economy. We shouldn't have to wait for a large company. We should do everything we can to create the environment for these small businesses to flourish and thrive, and for particularly African-American women, and Dr. Dacosta can piggyback on this, who we know are the fastest growing sector of small businesses in the country, to get the resources they need, particularly after COVID, to grow those businesses.
Joe Jackson, the National Association of Minority Contractors, I want to get you in the conversation. Should business pay for it?
That was a typo earlier, but he's since corrected. I'm with the US DOT Mid-South Atlantic Resource Center. But to your point, and listening to everyone, the key question is why, why are disparity studies important, and why do they exist? So obviously we're having this compelling conversation because we obviously know that there's some type of, disparity that exists. So in order to, first of all, defend a disparity study and to set goals for a disparity study. So if we see that there's a disparity for a certain market area availability for minority businesses, in order to stipulate those goals and to ask for that request, we have to have a disparity study that will constitutionally defend us from any lawsuits or et cetera. So just to share with you, I'm happy to work with a lot of DOTs throughout the country, and specifically with Georgia DOT, South Carolina DOT, and Tennessee DOT, which is in my Mid-South Atlantic region. And SCDOT is required to administer a statewide disparity study every so often in lieu of their federal dollars. So just to share with you as well, SCDOT has a disparity study, so they've already paid for it, and most agencies are able to build on to those disparities with a market area availability. But to Dr. Sellers' point and others' point, yeah, there are other areas that the DOT may not encompass from an industry, so you can build on to it from a statewide to look at your rural areas or other manufacturing areas or industries that disparities exist. But in order to first identify the anecdotal data and evidence that there is testimony, that there are discrimination in contracting opportunities, et cetera, a disparity study must be done to defend those goals, both race conscious and race neutral. So therefore you can stipulate those goals into a contract. So I would, encourage everyone to look at your state DOT, and DOT was at the forefront of many, many lawsuits many, many years ago that has provided the constitutionality behind disparity studies from Atty, et cetera, years ago. So every DOT who receives federal dollars are required to administer a disparity study. So outside of the state who funnels federal funds into transportation, you also have your local municipalities who also receive federal dollars for roads and bridges and T-SPLOST, and they normally follow the DOT disparity study. So I would challenge everyone to review your current disparity study and to see how you can build upon it.
All right, thank you. Joe Jackson with USDOT. Dr. Dacosta, so once, if, and when there is a disparity study in South Carolina, how do we make sure then something is done?
Well, for one, the commission is not going to wait for the study. We have to be proactive right now. We have to be able to make sure that resources are available, as well as the kinds of assistance our folks need, particularly in the small business industry. Right now, we are partnering with folks across the board, small business development centers, women business development centers. We are partnering with DOT, other government agencies, to try and come up with a plan that will work to get more small minority businesses to do business with the state. The study will come, and I know DOT has one. I have not reviewed it, but I will take a look at what it says. But we can't wait for the study. The time is now. We have to strike now, and that's what the commission's trying to do. Build an organization filled with private-public partnerships to make sure that small businesses all have the same opportunities to succeed in business.
Thank you. That is Dr. Delores Dacosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Mr. Jackson, I want to come back to you because we have a question from one of our viewers. I want to make sure you answer the question. They're saying, should South Carolina businesses, the top Black businesses, pay for the study?
Yes, well, once again, to Dr. Dacosta's point, I would encourage everyone to review the current study that's already available. So the state has already paid for your required state DOT disparity study that's required by every DOT mode throughout the United States. Everyone is required to do a statewide disparity study. In addition, because there are other certified DBEs from other states, in most cases it touches and concerns the surrounding states. So the disparity study is a very robust disparity study, and it shares with you the current lacking market area availability of men and women who are identified, but unfortunately they are not getting contracts. In addition, the disparity study already shows the anecdotal data that has been administered throughout the states to justify the disparity study based on the testimony that discrimination still in the contracting process. So in order to have a disparity study, the state hired a disparity agent who went out and administered the study from anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000. That's the going rate for a statewide disparity study. It's already been paid for. It's only good for 4 to 5 years before it sunsets, and you have to do the other disparity study. So it's real data. So you can look at your current disparity study that's already been administered and identify certain industries that may not be associated, and you can hopefully build on to those areas. One thing we like to say in the DOT buys a lot. So a lot of people may not think that there are certain industries that are represented within the disparity study, but you would be surprised of what DOT buys and the industries that are already in the disparity study.
That's Joe Jackson with the USDOT. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Minority Business Forecast. I'm Trey Taylor, and this is brought to you by the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. We also have with us Senator Gerald Malloy from District 29, Attorney Bakari Sellers, who is also a CNN analyst, and he's got to leave in just a couple of minutes. Also, Dr. Delores Dacosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission of Minority Affairs, and Frank Knapp, President and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. All right, so what is your outlook, Frank? I'll start with you for the overall U.S. economy and specifically South Carolina business economy. What does it look like to you?
Well, I think everybody's very optimistic. I think with the new administration getting the COVID under control, there's a lot of pent up demand for moving forward. I think we're going to see a robust economy. And that's why you have all the people on Wall Street worried about inflation. I'm looking forward to that. I think South Carolina is going to do well also. But the problem is, just because a lot of the economy is doing well doesn't mean all of the economy is doing well. And we know what's going to happen. We know what happened during the pandemic. There were more minority business owners that went out of business than everybody else. We've been knocked way down in our minority small businesses, and so we have a lot of room to catch up. And my question then is, what are we going to do that? Where are we going to find the resources? I know there's not much at the state level, but we ought to be looking at the federal level. We ought to be looking at how access to capital it can be made more available for our rural underserved communities. And if we continue to rely on banks and financial institutions or big corporations to do something, that's what we've been doing for 40 years. We need to be taking control of the government that we have and the resources we have to get that capital to the rural, underserved communities and minorities and women business owners to really jumpstart them and get this going. And that will play into a robust economic recovery.
Senator Malloy, Frank Knapp says that there are no resources, there are not enough resources at the state level. Are we able to get the resources from the state level to filter down into our rural communities, particularly for our minority and small businesses? We still can't hear you, Senator Malloy. I don't see that your mic is muted, but we still cannot hear you. I'm not sure why. Yeah. Can I suggest, can you log off and then log back on? Can you try that? That may help. Thank you so much. Bakari, I want to get you in here before you leave with the same question. Where, if the funds, as Frank said, are not at the state level, first of all, are they at the state level? And how do we get them to trickle down to our cities and communities?
So first, I mean, I probably should have said this from the beginning, but to Joe Jackson, Delores, Dacosta, Frank Knapp, and of course you, Trey, and the Legislative Black Caucus, just thank you so much. This is probably my last question I'll be able to stick around for. But let me answer it two ways. The outlook is great, as Frank said, because of the stimulus package, and it does include $350 billion, if I'm not mistaken, for state and local governments. And so there are going to be funds that are made available to the state of South Carolina in the form of a block grant. And so the question is, how is our legislature, when they stop debating open carry and abortion, how do they get around to figuring out the formulas so that this gets to the people it needs to get to? But look, small businesses and, the economy of South Carolina is going to flourish. It's not because of the $1,400 stimulus checks that people are going to get this weekend. But Trey, this is the first time in American history that we're taking direct aim at backbreaking generational poverty. Beginning in July, individuals are going to receive $500 to $600 a month for the rest of the year as a refundable child tax credit. I mean, this has never been done before. The average family, 85% of the families in this country are going to receive $14,000. And we're talking about the lower part of the K. When you talk about a recovery, we're talking about the bottom half of the K. And so this is going to fundamentally change individuals. This isn't even including the rental assistance, et cetera. But this is going to change the buying power. This is going to change the outlook of our economy. So I'm looking forward to much better days. And maybe even one day where we get a universal basic income, which is a whole nother conversation, where we can really stimulate growth. So thank you guys for having me, and continue to have a blessed weekend.
Thank you so much, Bakari. We appreciate you. Senator Malloy, can you say something? Let's see if we can hear you now.
Hello?
All righty. You're cooking with audio.
Okay, well, finally. So I would go back to the beginning about the disparity study. I just want to say, one, is that we have enough studies and enough committees Basically, what we do know is that we have an increased population around our state. We have 27% people of color. We have an influx of population that's coming in. The General Assembly has dealt with a lot of things as it relates to CARES Act funding, with the minority money that we had set aside, the vaccines that are going on, dealing with businesses, and a lot of questions as to how the pandemic has been handled. Having said that, I think we've talked about it enough. We know that there is some disparities. And I'm not certain if someone said anything about the fact that a study sort of backs up and sort of substantiates what we already know. I think the General Assembly has a real responsibility to look at our state, the division that we have in our state, where we have about 6 counties that take up about half of our population, with an influx of people that's coming in from a lot of urban areas. And we got some real winners and losers on a lot of these matters as it relates to it. You know, for example, universities are having a very difficult time because of online learning and those kinds of things. What we have to end up knowing now is this, is that the expected revenue in our area is better than our sister states. I have some data that we end up having that our decline in percent pre-COVID-19 revenue projections was like 1% for 2020 and expected to be only 7% in 2021. And so what does that mean going forward? Let's see how we're able to use the resources that come in from the package that's coming in from the federal government. Are we going to be able to end up handling broadband and those issues that are really needed in our area? What are we going to do is to end up connecting the divide in the educational aspect that we have when we've had children that have not been in schools, that have been trying to learn through and by the internet services. As you see, I'm having some problems right here in my office. And basically, if someone has already addressed it, you know, I apologize, but the vaccine that we're trying to end up getting to get our economy going back, to make sure that we can end up having enough resources for there to tie some of these funds over to end up helping minority businesses, people, women in businesses, and to make certain that folks have access to the resources that we end up having. And so our responsibility is to make certain that we adhere to the definitions of politics. It's about how we establish priorities. And priorities has to be for our entire state, just not for part of it.
That's Senator Gerald Malloy. I want to ask you, Ms. Dacosta, what do you believe is needed for minority businesses in South Carolina to continue surviving in the pandemic? And what do you think they need to recover? Please unmute your mic.
All right, done. I'm going to have to agree with Diane Sumter when she made the comment that, first of all, folks need to decide if they really want to be in business. That's the first hurdle. Because if you really want to be in business, then it is going to be the responsibility of that business owner to help us find the right solutions to help them. I believe that if they become a part of the solution, they would appreciate the results a whole lot more. Throwing money at a failing business will not work if we do not help them with their infrastructure. And that's not just your new starts. The new starts, you can train them from the beginning. Those who are already in business, we need to find ways to provide the kind of technical assistance that they may need to move forward. How do we help them become resilient? One way, you have to have a plan A, B, and C to be in business. You have to be able to bounce back. And to do that, you have to think outside of the box. You have to be creative and allow yourself to take the risk in order to bring your business back to life. I've been working with the minority businesses since COVID. We were responsible for disseminating $40 million to minority business owners. We received over 9,000 applications for this $40 million. Of the 9,000, maybe 2,200 were African-American owned businesses.
Wow.
The bulk of the businesses did not receive grant funding because of minor things such as not having a plan, not knowing how to manage a bank account, not filing taxes, things of that nature. Those are the basic things that business owners need to understand if they want the financial institutions to take them seriously. When the CARES Act came out last June, a lot of small businesses were turned away because, and I think it was said in one of the previous panels, relationships. They had no banking relationships. So banks were not going to take the risk of lending money because they don't know the history of that business owner. Those are the kinds of things that my commission is working on right now, along with the Small Business Development Centers, SCORE, we are SBA. We are partnering with all of these folks because we need to come up with a comprehensive plan to help strengthen these businesses so that the next time funds are available, they will be able to stand on their own status, being a strong, viable business in this state. And that's where we are headed with this. We can pour as much money as we want to into a business. It's like giving a poor person $1 million. If they never learn how to manage that $1 million, they're going to be broken and very quickly.
All right, that's Dr. Delores Dacosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Joe Jackson with the U.S. DOT. I want to ask you this question, please. How competitive are South Carolina's DBEs and minority and small businesses in comparison to our neighboring states?
Well, this is something so often I try to make sure that we have our pulse on, since we deal with both Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. We have probably just about a similar amount of certified DBEs. Okay, we have DBEs respectively for South Carolina. We have DBEs who are certified with SC-DOT and they're in South Carolina, and we have DBEs who are certified and they lived in their home state of Tennessee and Georgia, but they're certified in South Carolina. And some have been successful in doing business in South Carolina, and vice versa. Various businesses from South Carolina has been successful in doing business in other states as well. So what I would add is I'm happy to hear that the US DOT has interstate certification. So no longer is the certification process an administrative burden. So if someone's in South Carolina and they're seeking to do business in Georgia or in Tennessee, all they have to do is to contact the State B DOT, and the State B DOT will utilize their certification from their home state in South Carolina. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that that administrative burden has been removed. So therefore, firms can partner with one another. So to your question, one thing I would highly advocate is that businesses begin to increase their capacity and to scale their business and partner with one another. I've heard so often, a lot of our panelists have said we cannot wait for studies, right? We cannot wait for joint ventures or other programs to be assessed in a contract. So I challenge businesses to begin to partner amongst themselves so they can increase their capacity, and combined, they could probably go after a larger project in Georgia or Tennessee or South Carolina. So as it relates to the state, I'm very optimistic that all three states have a robust transportation plan and the dollars will begin to flow. And this is why I want to just insert back to the importance of a disparity study, because it's unlike just another study. You're absolutely right. I agree wholeheartedly. One thing we don't need is another study for a study. But federal funds, and when funds begin to hit our state, and they will, before we can assess goals on those federal contracts, the disparity study will defend it. Because what will happen, you may have a silent arm, and if you assess or stipulate a goal in a contract, and if you don't have the anecdotal data or the disparity study to defend it, what they're going to do, and we've seen it across the country, organizations and individual companies such as the Western states I would encourage you to go visit the Western State Challenge, where a contractor sued the state because they did not have a proper disparity study and they required minority participation in a state of Washington contract. And what happened was they took it to court, and the federal courts deemed that their DBE program was not being applied properly. So they canceled their DBE program for 3 years, and they had to wait until they did a disparity study for the program to come back. And we cannot have that happen on our watch. So that's the only reason why a disparity study, when we know that disparities exist, we're going to advocate for goals to be on the contract, we must have a disparity study to defend it.
All right, that's Joe Jackson with the USDOT. We're also joined by Senator Gerald Malloy, District 29, Chesterfield, Darlington, Lee, and Marlboro counties. Dr. Delores Dacosta, Executive Director with the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs, and Frank Knapp, President and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. I'm Trey Taylor, and you're watching the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Senator Malloy, I'd like to ask you next, there's a bill working through the General Assembly on broadband, and recently the Charleston port. What could this mean for minority business? I want to ask you and then go to you, Mr. Knapp, and then you, Mr. Jackson.
I think that any matter that we have as it relates to business, and when the state is trying to work on the infrastructure, is of a benefit to any viable business. The issue with the ports bill is probably a bill of greater significance because of the fact there's $550 million in GO bonds, and basically, if you look at it, it's a small amount as it relates to our capacity, but it's still a tremendous amount as it relates to the request. The request had come in a pretty quick fashion. Does it assist in minority business? I think that obviously that it does, but to what detriment? I think that whenever you're talking about putting some money like that into that area, how is it going to affect the housing, the living of those folks that are around the areas of the port, and then how much does it impact the rest of the state of South Carolina? I think that what we have is, I think there's going to be a continuing debate on that issue, because what the port does is that they make the claim that it affects 10% of the jobs in the state of South Carolina. But where does that 10% go? I mean, we know that there's heavily substantiated in Greenville, maybe some of the other areas, but the rural areas don't have the manufacturing and those kind of things that go along with it, except for maybe Dillon. Broadband is one that is one that we have to end up having. I think that what we as we continue to see the world after the pandemic, we won't see it the same way that we saw it beforehand. You're going to have access to each other through and by the internet. I mean, we're challenged in rural areas. We see how we're able to attribute the funds that we have in this last package, and something that Congressman Clyburn has worked on a lot. And so, in the end, the real challenges have been those that are in the storefront businesses are going to be challenged a bit, even in rural areas. People that have areas that where they're used to doing business in a certain way, it's going to be a change. And so we got to end up making sure that broadband is as great as it can for the upload and the download, so you can make sure that you can end up having access to one another. I think that the issue on the port is an issue that really is going to require some study and work. I think other issues that, hate crimes legislation, a lot of things is going to end up promoting business. We're going to see how different companies will weigh in to end up helping minority-owned businesses in this climate. So I think there's a lot of things. Everything that we do has an impact upon minority businesses and rural businesses, as we were talking, and women. We got to decide how we end up handling these grant funds and loan programs. And so this is a time whenever money is cheap. We hope that it stays the same. I think that what we got to do now is learn what is happening in this last stimulus package to see what effect it has on the revenue with the unemployment fund, that the money that is coming in, where it is extended, how it shapes the revenue going forward. And we're still waiting on the revenue to end up coming in, the estimates, projections that we have for the budget for this coming year. We don't expect a huge change, but the thing is, I think we have to end up studying it very, very carefully. So with the help of this panel, I think that some good information from Dr. Dacosta and from Mr. Knapp as it relates to the small businesses and what happens. We saw exactly what Dr. Dacosta had seen. Folks were not able to navigate the PPP program. They had a lot of people that were not having access to banks. There were a lot of folks that got the PPP money that you can challenge as to whether it was actually needed. Was it the intended result for it? And when we first started working on getting the money for the minority businesses, it's only $2,000 to $25,000, and the applications were abundant. The money was not sufficient, and obviously we just have to work and continue to end up doing more. But also, my last point is that we have to be ready to receive. And so when you are making a request for funds, you got to be able to receive it. And obviously, government works best whenever we are ready to end up having all of our apparatus in place.
Thank you, Senator Malloy. Before I go to Mr. Knapp and then to you, Mr. Jackson, I want to ask a follow-up question, please, Senator Malloy. Are there opportunities associated with this? Is there the need for a school bond bill to build new facilities? What could this mean for Black and minority business?
So I think that it means a lot for businesses if it happens, but the challenge is that it's more of a political question as more so than a need question. It's more of a political question. And I think that what happens is that money is cheap, the ratings of the state is good, and the question is that do we have political will to make certain that we make an investment into education? And I think that right now we're challenged in that aspect. I mean, what the General Assembly has demonstrated that they're more apt to end up passing a bill for GO bonds for the port and to end up leaving their revenue bonds in place than they end up doing something for education. And so that is a real challenge. And I think that what happens with that is that simply put, elections matter. They have consequences. We can make the request for it. It is a challenging proposition. In my humble opinion, I just don't see it happening.
Right. Thank you, Senator Malloy. I know we are right at the time we're supposed to wrap up the panel, but I do want to ask you, Mr. Knapp, and then you, Mr. Jackson, the same question. The need for both broadband ports and building schools and the opportunities for Black, minority, and small business. Mr. Knapp, and then you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Look, for everybody who's listening or watching, if we can be of assistance in promoting broadband, affordable broadband statewide, that is one of our priorities this year. Please contact me. We'd love to work with you. Look, if we don't have broadband in our rural areas, we can't expect them to grow. That is a basic infrastructure needed. And so I'm very pleased that the state's put a little bit of money in. It's never enough. Congressman Clyburn has his $94 billion introduction of broadband for the underserved and communities. That bill is going to be also offered in the Senate by Amy Klobuchar. The word is that it looks like it probably can go through. Which will be a major hit, but we just got to make sure we manage this properly and have somebody in charge of figuring out where the broadband needs to go and making sure it gets there. So that is important. We just simply have to understand that we've been talking about building out, let's say, the I-95 corridor economically for how many decades and decades and decades, and we've not done it. We've not done it for a number of reasons. One is infrastructure, and the other is capital, getting capital to those rural communities to start businesses. So we can't rely on the banks to do this. Banks, there are 68% fewer banks today than there was in 2008. So banks are shrinking, consolidating. They don't want to make small loans. We need to have the federal government step up. And we have a proposal out there called Reform the SBA. It's online. And you can see what we talk about access to capital and making sure we can start getting direct money infused into these rural communities. And to really get them going. And one last thing I want to say, and just to Dr. Dacosta's comment, I just want to make sure that nobody hears her words of what she says about the needs of the minority community and the PPP money and this, and take it out of context and think that she's blaming those minority entrepreneurs. They a lot of them are coming in from maybe rural areas. They don't have the maybe sophistication. Maybe they don't have the education. Maybe they don't have a lot of the things that folks that look like me have. And so it doesn't mean they don't want to have it. It's just that we've not done a good job of helping them get where they need to go with their knowledge and their technical expertise. And we need to do that. I'm glad to hear that the small business development centers and the women's business centers all want to try to figure this out. But we've got to do that, and we've got to get it out to the rural communities, not make people come to Columbia to get it. Thank you very much. Appreciate being on the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Mr. Jackson, of the port and broadband, those bills moving through the General Assembly, will there be opportunities for small minority and Black-owned businesses?
Great. Well, once again, similar to Dr. Sellers, I want to say thank you very much for having me, and I've enjoyed serving on the panel with everyone. And also on behalf of the USDOT Mid-South Atlantic region, I will definitely have my team reach out to everyone, because we have resources available within the DOT, and we've partnered with the City of Columbia, the airport, and various others in years past, the SBA. So we look forward to partnering with you, sharing with you the opportunities that exist. I started this business almost 25 years ago, and I started because someone said something that was exciting when I started in this industry. And he shared with me that at the beginning, the turn of the century, that there are going to be three industries that are so important. It's going to be the transportation of messaging, communication, the transportation of money, e-commerce, and of course, the transportation of people. And of course, I have not been able to get out of this industry for almost 25 years because it's so robust. Mm-hmm. So, broadband, transportation, access, it's important. Messaging, moving of people. So as it's moving through the House bill, and as these contracts are being identified or planned, several things I partner with entities all the time is we administer a social economic impact. So what does the broadband opportunity mean to the homeowners who may be displaced, to the jobs that may be displaced? But on the positive note, what does it mean by the indirect and direct multiplier of opportunities that may exist? So this is a great time while they're planning for this great opportunity, once again, to identify the opportunities where they exist for small and minority-owned businesses, because if it's not stipulated during the planning process, it will not be realized and obtained during the implementation process. So we have best practices to share on social economic impact studies. I would be more to reach out to anyone and share the template, because so often when the federal government spends a lot of money within our regions, we have 12 centers throughout the United States, and we're normally called, and the question that's normally asked, we're about to spend and send federal dollars to this state. Based on their DBE program, can you help and assure us that the money will be used wisely and the DBEs will have an opportunity? And this is why we partner with our different partners to make sure that once the federal dollars hit, it's a reality to the small businesses. And to Dr. Caucus point, and to Mr. Knapp, thank you very much for what you said, because you're right, with the PPP and a lot of programs, the one thing that small businesses are dealing with, especially African-Americans businesses, where the median business gross revenue is $1 million. That's not a whole lot of business based on the contracts I see. However, $1 million to a small business is a lifeline, and it means a lot. So
Absolutely.
not only do we have to help them to obtain that opportunity, but they always struggle with the sustaining. So there's one thing to have a contract today, but if we don't write minority participation in contracts and enforce it and make sure that it's sustainable, unfortunately, there's no way a business can make a wise business decision to constantly go after that segment. Because if there is no support for them, they can take their $1 million and go private sector and go other areas and make a great living. So I would encourage everyone to make sure that they continue to advocate to make sure that minority participation is stipulated in contracts. Georgia and South Carolina, with the buying power that came out in 2019 for African-American businesses, ranked within the top 10 African-American with the highest percentage of buying powers for African-Americans. With the previous 2009 economic downturn that we came out of, African-American buying power has increased to $1.4 trillion. That's huge. So we need to continue to advocate and support business because we are a great consumer. For the money that's coming out, we're going to spend the money, but we need to support our businesses so therefore we can become producers and manufacturers. So with that said and done, we're here to support. You have my information. Please reach out to Devin and get my information. We'll be more than happy to share best practices. And thank you very much for having me.
Joe Jackson, USDOT Mid-South Atlantic Region, also Senator Gerald Malloy, District 29, Chesterfield, Darlington, Lee, and Marlboro counties. Dr. Delores Dacosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs, and Frank Knapp, President and CEO of South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you for your incredible information and advice and resources and your knowledge and expertise that you shared to the viewers today. Thank you again. I'm Trey Taylor. On behalf of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, we thank you again so much for joining us today. Coming up, more information in the close. Want you to continue to post and share this information out past today so that we can continue to get the information to the folks that need it. Again, I'm Trey Taylor. I invite you to join me weekdays at 2 o'clock for Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. It airs on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, weekdays at 2 o'clock. Until then, again, on behalf of Chair Patricia Hennigan and the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, thank you so much for joining us for the Minority Business Forecast.
The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus was founded in 1975 with the mission to improve the quality of life for Black and minority communities in South Carolina. Since its founding under the leadership of Judge Ernest Finney Jr., the caucus has been the catalyst behind significant legislative action and policy changes in South Carolina that brought efforts of justice and fairness for all South Carolinians. Caucus efforts have led to state statute requiring consideration of minority businesses in the process of awarding state contracts, the creation of the Governor's Office for Small and Minority Businesses, the South Carolina Commission of Minority Affairs, and the state's Human Affairs Commission. The caucus is currently comprised of 45 members, including 12 state senators and 33 members of the South Carolina House of Representatives. In January 2021, State Representative Patricia Hennigan assumed the role of chair of the caucus, marking the third woman to be elected to lead the historic organization. Chair Hennigan has announced an active and comprehensive plan for the caucus that centers on increasing overall exposure and opportunities for minority communities across South Carolina. The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus remains committed to its founding motto, like limbs, we reach toward the sun, but feed from a common root. The caucus remains readily available to serve the citizens of South Carolina, continuously fighting for justice and fairness.
Good morning to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. I bring you greetings from the R.C. Wilson Group and the Wilson family. I've been blessed to have been able to work with the caucus for over 25 years, working to help to improve the quality of life of families in our communities. The 2021 Minority Business Forecast proves to continue that legacy under the leadership of Chairwoman Pat Hennigan. I am excited, and I'm looking forward to being enriched by the panelists, the panel, and the moderator. Good luck. God bless you. And I am excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
The Carolina Panorama has been the news and information source for the African American community in South Carolina since 1986. Founded by Nathaniel Abraham Sr., the publication is now in its second generation and being managed by Nathaniel Abraham Jr. Like and follow the Panorama on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and pick up your copy of the Carolina Panorama every Thursday. Positive news for a positive community. The Carolina Panorama.
Our story is we were live streaming way before it was popular. We're trying to get event planners to live stream their events, but they were like, nah, people won't show up. Well, good thing for us, COVID happened, and these same people came showing up with masks saying, hey, what was that you said about live streaming? God's blessed us to be able to help the government and political campaigns and shows and many other organizations get their messages out. Very important information, especially in this pandemic. We'd love to help your business out also at www.freethinkersradio.com.
Hello again, 2021 Minority Business Forecast participants. We hope that you enjoyed this event and were able to take some useful information back to your business and community. Remember that the members of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus are always here to assist you, and you can contact us anytime. I suggest the caucus host this event because I believe we must do more to help our Black and minority communities, and you can set the date that the Minority Business Forecast will be back next year. I thank you again for participating. God bless you, your business, your families, our great state, and our great country. Until the next time, goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Continue to tag, post, and share this informative session. And please continue to comment. Your questions will be reviewed and addressed at a later date. For more information on today's Minority Business Forecast or the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, contact Devin Owens at dowens.sclbc@gmail.com. Please like and follow the caucus on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. On behalf of Madam Chair Representative Patricia Hennigan and the entire SCLBC, thank you again. God bless. And remember, Black business, women business, minority business, your business matters to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus.